Good morning and welcome to today's webinar from East Capital Group. My name is Marcus Rågmark, member of the sales team at East Capital Group. Today's webinar will be focusing on the Nordic small cap market, exploring the reasons behind its massive success, and also introducing our recently launched fund, Espiria Sweden Small Cap. I'm delighted to be joined by Staffan Östlin, portfolio manager of our new fund, Espiria Sweden Small Cap, and Staffan brings nearly 40 years of experience in the Nordic equity markets. So welcome, Staffan.
Thank you very much.
Before we dive in, I'd also like to take a few minutes, especially given our international audience today, to highlight some of the key reasons why the Nordic small cap sector is so attractive as an investment region, and some of the key characteristics that make it compelling for investors. First of all, the Nordic region has a very strong equity culture with a high share of household savings allocated to equities, and this is largely due to very supportive regulation and investment-friendly policies that have been in place for many, many years. And this has, of course, created a deep and very vibrant ecosystem among the local investor base here in the Nordics, both among institutional as well as retail investors, with a large range of small and mid-cap listed companies. Just as an example, over the past decade, there have been more IPOs in Sweden than in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain combined, which I think is a remarkable testament to the strength and the depth of the local market here in the Nordics. So Staffan, moving over to you, as I mentioned, you have close to 4 decades of experience, so a wealth of knowledge about the Nordic equity markets. Can you share how you've seen this space develop over time?
Yeah, I mean, to start with a sort of a history lesson, it all started around early 80s when the Swedish government wanted to stimulate the stock market, and they started a small cap list called OTC-listan. And back in 1984, that was sort of the first dedicated small cap fund. It was established in Sweden. And that was quickly followed by others, because people were interested in these companies, were growth companies. They saw that you had a very good performance in these stocks. So they became very popular. Towards the end of the 90s, I would say that the international investors started to get interest for this sector. I worked in New York at that time, and I had the privilege of having a lot of Swedish small caps over there and introducing them to US investors. And since then, I think that Swedish small caps has always been sort of on the top of people's mind when they talk about European small caps.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Staffan. And I think that nicely sets the scene for the Nordics and the case. So if we sort of move ahead and look at where we stand today, what would you say has defined the Nordic small cap market in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, performance has not been stellar, I would say. On the contrary, it's been quite lukewarm, and small caps have underperformed large caps, which is pretty unusual. If you look at the long-term chart that we had, and you can see the sort of long-term outperformance, and even if you go back to the sort of 90s, you have the same outperformance. Looking at valuations today, small caps actually trading at a discount to large caps, which is also pretty highly unusual. And I mean, we all know that small caps, they do grow faster. It's easier to grow when you're small. So normally you have a high valuation.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can just pull up that chart again, showing how small caps have significantly outperformed their large cap peers. And I mean, this is on a 20-year horizon. Yeah. So I mean, these past couple of years, it's barely a blip on the long-term chart.
No, and exactly. And I mean, we do see the peak there, and obviously a lot of the small caps were overvalued at that time, but a lot of them has also grown into the valuation. So I think that timing-wise, the timing for Swedish small caps or Nordic small caps is actually pretty good.
Great. Yeah. And on that note, are there any particular sectors or companies that you find sort of particularly exciting at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, we have election year in Sweden next year, and one can expect a lot of stimulus. I think the private consumption could be very good, and we have seen during third quarter Swedish private consumption in fixed prices were up by 3% versus 2% in second quarter and 0% in Q1, and I think that will continue. And we have a lot of Swedish consumer durable companies like we have like Nobia, we have like Pierce, for example, but also healthcare sector, and that's also been sort of a hallmark of the Swedish market, because we have historically have had very good pharma companies like now AstraZeneca. Pharmacia was eventually bought up and split up in a number of companies. But since then, we've also seen the establishment of new companies coming into the market, like Camurus, for example. Sort of that's a 40 billion Swedish krona market cap company, sort of. But that company didn't exist for 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So
no, and again, I think that illustrates what I was alluding to earlier, that there is this constant stream of new exciting companies coming to market across the Nordics. So that's great. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we recently launched Espiria Sweden Small Cap, which is a Nordic small cap fund to tap into this really exciting and dynamic market that we've just introduced. And Staffan recently took on the role as portfolio manager for the fund. So could you tell us a bit about the philosophy of the fund and sort of the gap that you aim to fill in the market?
Yeah, because as I said, I mean, Swedish small caps and funds have become very popular. I think that there are more than 100 funds focusing on the market, from micro cap focus companies to focus funds to mid cap. We tend to have a different view because we have. Firstly, we have a blend philosophy, like we have a combination of both growth and value, and also can look at special situations. We have a highly focused portfolio, around 30 to 40 names. That can be compared to most small cap funds. They have basically around between 80 and 120 companies or stocks in their portfolio. So it's very difficult for them to really beat index. I think that to beat the market, you have to do your homework, you have to think not as everybody else really. So you have to look at where others don't look.
Sure.
And we have, from a risk profile, we want to have one value part where we have strong balance sheets. We have maybe mature markets, but still growth, and we can see strong free cash flow generation. We have a growth part, and in the growth part we have typically a little bit smaller companies, but still companies with sales and hopefully earnings. Then we also have a part which we call sort of special situations, and there we can be sometimes opportunistic, because we can see there are times in the market where a stock can be beaten up too much, or there can be a sort of a short-term problem, etc. So
that's great. Thanks, Staffan. And I think just also to add one point, I think which is important in terms of differentiating from other peers in the market. You mentioned there are close to 100 or even above 100 small cap funds in the universe, and the Nordics have a lot of these investor darlings. Basically, all of the large funds own a lot of the same stocks. And there I think you've basically managed to stick out a bit in terms of your top holdings not being found in so many portfolios.
Exactly. So I'm really diversification. I mean, you can own 2 Swedish small cap funds, and basically, and it's good to have our fund, because if you buy the large funds like Fund A or Fund B or Fund C, they will basically develop or perform very similar, because they tend to have the same large holdings.
Yeah. Great. And looking into the portfolio composition a bit further, then you highlighted here the 3 different legs that you'll find in the fund. Are there any particular companies that you can highlight which sort of fit into the respective buckets here?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with the sort of value part, and the largest position we have in the fund is actually a company called Getinge, medtech company. It was listed back in 1995. At that time, it had 500 million in sales in Swedish kroner. Today, it has 35 billion in sales, so it's grown, but a very strong balance sheet. Perception-wise, this is a company which the market has been skeptical towards for a long time because they had company-specific problems. And there is a CEO which we really like. He has, during the last 6-7 years, really fixed these problems, but the market hasn't really appreciated it yet. So low valuation, a company growing by 46% per year, and with a very strong cash flow generation, and with a very good main owner in Carl Bennett, who has a fantastic track record. So that's sort of a low-risk company with significant revaluation potential.
And in terms of growth, special situations?
Yeah, in growth, I can one sort of company I would like to mention is Hansa Biopharma. Not very well known, and that's only a 2.5-3 billion Swedish krona market cap company. The company has a product with, you know, that there's a lot of people waiting for a kidney transplantation, and around 15-20% of these patients, they are highly sensitized, which means that they have very, very low or zero chance to get a new kidney, because they will. So basically, using that drug, these patients, which today they can only have sort of dialysis for the rest of their lives, but they can find a new kidney. And this drug is selling in Europe. Came out with a US study during the fall here with fantastic results, and will most likely be introduced in the US next year. So huge unmet medical need. This drug works, and since last spring they have a stellar management as well. Otherwise we wouldn't have bought this stock, but management has been crucial here, I would say.
Yeah. No, great. And you mentioned there sort of two companies within the healthcare space, and I think the healthcare sector is one sector in particular where, you know, the Nordics and maybe Sweden and Denmark, of course, really managed to punch above their weight in terms of developing these fantastic companies. In terms of the two case studies there, that brings me nicely to my next question. We have Getinge, which is around 6 billion euro market cap. You have Hansa Biopharma, around 250-300 million euros market cap. So clearly it's a very large universe, not only in terms of number of companies, but also the size of the companies. And I think that's an important point to stress. I think mentioning Nordic small caps might sound slightly exotic, particularly to international investors. Nevertheless, this universe basically allows for companies to have a market cap of close to 10 billion euros, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So the companies don't necessarily need to be very small, rather large, on the contrary. But nevertheless, you can also complement this with very exciting smaller names such as Hansa Biopharma. Anything you would like to comment sort of on the structure of the market when it comes to market cap and sort of the wide range you can find?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a two-tier market, because the larger sort of mid caps that you have in this space, they are normally or quite often very highly valued. They are very popular among the small cap funds. But you also have a string of companies, sort of, which you can see, sort of, that's really the tail end of our portfolio, where undiscovered gems, because companies below 1 billion or 100 million euros in market cap, they clearly don't get any attention by traditional small cap funds. We try to look there first, and we try to be early investors in these kind of companies.
Fantastic. Looking ahead then into, I mean, almost at year end now, so looking into 2026, do you have any predictions as to how the year will develop for Nordic small caps? And why should international investors in particular be looking at this sector?
Yeah, no, as I said, I mean, election year in Sweden, that's very good because you will have more stimulus. You have had a year of underperformance. You will have, looking at the forecast that we have for the small cap space versus the large cap space, that tells us that you will have higher earnings growth both in 2026 and also in 2027. And normally stock prices do follow earnings. I think that you have, during this year, you have had outflows in the small cap funds. Hopefully that will come to an end. So I think sort of from a valuation point of view, it's a great timing.
Time to enter.
Yeah.
Very good. So thank you, Staffan, for sharing your insights. And thank you to all of our listeners for taking the time to dial in. And of course, if you would like to learn more in detail about the Nordic small cap sector, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues, as well, of course, as to learn more about our new fund, Espiria Sweden Small Cap, which Staffan is managing and which has a great potential now moving into 2026. So with that, thanks again, and hope to see you soon.